My name is Violet, and I am a 36-year-old woman who has spent the last 7 years working at the National Archives and Records Administration. This job has always been fulfilling for me, offering a daily immersion into significant historical documents and artifacts. However, recently I've begun to feel a void in my life. I lost my parents in a tragic car accident when I was in my early 20s, a loss that left me profoundly alone. Since then, I have buried myself in my work, attempting to ignore the deep-seated loneliness that quietly gnaws at me. As my mid-30s approached, the desire for more personal connection became undeniable. I longed for a family of my own. One day, as we celebrated a colleague's birthday, my coworker Sophia invited me to join everyone in the break room. Amidst the festive atmosphere, I observed Sophia sneak peeks at her phone, likely messaging her husband. A twinge of envy struck me as I watched my peers enjoying their personal interactions. William, who was celebrating his birthday, offered me a piece of cake and jokingly suggested setting me up with his nephew, noticing my single status. I appreciated the gesture but smiled and declined politely. Despite several setups and casual dates, none seemed to align with what I was looking for, someone who prioritized family and offered stability. Later that day, as I sorted through files, my supervisor, Mr. David, approached me with a new assignment. A farmer from upstate, interested in acquiring an abandoned neighboring plot, needed our help. Intrigued by the prospect of such a unique client, I eagerly accepted the task. The next morning, I made sure to arrive at work early, taking extra care of my appearance. Despite trying to downplay the significance of the day, Sophia playfully commented on my efforts. Just as we were talking, Mr. David introduced me to our new client, Jonathan. Contrary to my expectations of an elderly, rugged farmer, Jonathan was a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair, dressed casually yet sharply in jeans and a plaid shirt. "Please call me Jonathan," he said with a warm, engaging smile, extending a hand weathered from physical labor. His firm handshake sparked an unexpected flutter in my stomach, but I composed myself and invited him to discuss his project. As we sat down, his presence, marked by a quiet confidence, seemed to command the room. Jonathan was eager to expand his farm and envisioned planting an orchard on the adjacent land. As he spoke about his plans, his enthusiasm was palpable and his eyes sparkled with ambition. This conversation marked the beginning of not just a professional relationship, but a personal connection that promised to grow just as fruitfully as the orchard he hoped to cultivate. As Jonathan talked about needing to find the owners of the property, his passion was evident, and it immediately captivated me. His enthusiasm for his work was refreshing and infectious. We spent several hours together, diving into ancient property records. Jonathan proved to be exceptionally knowledgeable, asking sharp questions that streamlined our search significantly. As we worked, our conversation flowed naturally. "So, how long have you been farming?" I asked during a quiet moment. Jonathan's expression softened. "Born and raised on a farm. Took it over from my dad about 53 years ago. It's challenging, but I wouldn't have it any other way." There was a hint of something deeper in his voice that piqued my curiosity. "It sounds like there's a story behind that," I remarked. He paused, seeming to decide how much to share. "Well, it's just me and my boys now. My wife, she passed away a few years back." My heart tightened in empathy. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan. That must be incredibly tough." He nodded, managing a sad smile. "It is. But my boys, they keep me going. They're 6 great kids." A wave of sympathy washed over me. "I lost my parents years ago. I know it's not the same, but I understand the weight of loss." The rest of the day flew by as we made substantial progress with the property search. However, it was clear we needed more time. As Jonathan was leaving, he turned back hesitantly. "Listen, Violet, I know this might be unconventional, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime to discuss the case more?" My heart fluttered. "I'd like that, Jonathan. For the case, of course." Over the next few weeks, Jonathan and I met regularly, ostensibly focusing on the property case. However, our discussions often ventured beyond land records and legal documents. I found myself opening up to him more than I had with anyone else in a long time. One day, as we wrapped up our session, Jonathan hesitated. "Violet, I hope I'm not overstepping, but would you like to come out to the farm this weekend? The boys and I are having a little barbecue. Nothing fancy." Excitement mixed with nerves at the invitation. "I'd love to, Jonathan. Are you sure the boys would be okay with it?" He smiled, his eyes crinkling warmly. "They've been asking to meet you. I might have mentioned you once or twice." That Saturday, I drove out to Jonathan's farm, watching the city landscape give way to rolling hills and open fields. As I pulled up to the farmhouse, I saw Jonathan and two young boys waiting on the porch. "Violet," Jonathan called out, beckoning me over. Stepping out of my car, I felt a flutter of nerves. The younger boy shyly hid behind Jonathan's leg, while the older one looked at me with curiosity. "Boys, this is Miss Violet from the archives," Jonathan introduced. "And Violet, these are my sons, Colton and Liam." Colton, the older boy, stepped forward. "Do you work with old stuff all day? That's cool." I chuckled, feeling more at ease. "I do. Maybe I can show you some interesting documents sometime." Liam, still a bit shy, peeked out from behind Jonathan. "Do you like chickens?" "We have chickens." And just like that, any awkwardness melted away. The boys took me on a tour of the farm, showing me their favorite spots and introducing me to various animals. Jonathan trailed behind, his soft smile ever present. As the day unfolded, I seamlessly blended into the rhythm of life with Jonathan and his boys. We grilled burgers, played catch in the yard, and ended the evening roasting marshmallows over a fire. As the boys drifted to sleep on a nearby blanket, Jonathan and I sat under the stars in comfortable silence. "Thank you for today," I said softly, grateful for the unexpected connection and the warmth of a newfound family. As Jonathan turned to me, his expression earnest, he spoke candidly. "Violet, I need to be upfront with you. I like you, and I feel you might have similar feelings. But you must know my sons, and I come as a full package. Being a single dad and managing the farm isn't always simple." Taking a deep breath, I gather my thoughts before responding. "Jonathan, I have feelings for you too, and your boys are wonderful. It won't be simple, but I'm eager to see where this journey leads us if you are." Jonathan's face lit up with a joyful smile as he took my hand gently. "I'd like that very much, Violet." The following months felt like living a dream. Jonathan and I became closer, and I found myself spending increasing amounts of time at the farm. His boys, Colton and Liam, quickly took to me, awakening a maternal side I hadn't known existed. One chilly autumn evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, Jonathan looked at me with a grave yet hopeful expression. "Violet, these last 7 months have been the happiest I've had in years. It might seem quick, but when it feels right, it just does. Violet Thompson, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I answered without hesitation, "Yes, Jonathan, I will marry you." Our wedding was a modest celebration on the farm, surrounded by close friends and family. Dressed in a simple white gown, I walked towards Jonathan, who looked dashing in his suit, with Colton and Liam grinning at his side. However, my joy waned slightly when I overheard a comment from Jonathan's mother during the reception. "She's awfully slender, isn't she? I'm not sure she's suited for farm life," she muttered. "Give her time, Lainey," Jonathan's father reassured. "She'll either toughen up or break." I tried to dismiss their words, focusing on the joy of the day, but a seed of doubt had been planted. After our honeymoon, I moved permanently to the farm, a significant change from my job and city life. Jonathan proposed I quit working to focus on the home and children, and I eagerly accepted, ready to embrace my new roles as wife and stepmother. Initially, everything seemed perfect. I immersed myself in farm life, learning to cook substantial meals, maintain the vegetable garden, and assist with lighter farm tasks. The boys flourished under my care, and I cherished reading to them at night and helping with their homework. However, as time passed, the charm began to wane. The labor was relentless and physically demanding. I hadn't anticipated the extent of effort required to run a farm. My hands, once delicate from office work, grew calloused and rough. Jonathan's parents, who lived nearby, were frequent visitors. His mother, Lainey, seized every chance to critique my efforts. "You call this a proper farm breakfast?" She'd scoff at my cooking attempts. "In my day, we have had 3 kinds of meat on the table by now." I tried to shrug off her remarks, but they stung. Jonathan, preoccupied with the farm, seemed unaware of my difficulties. One tough day, as I struggled to guide a stubborn cow into the barn, Jonathan shouted from his tractor, "Come on, Violet, put your back into it. Food doesn't just appear on the table, you know?" I suppressed a retort, feeling a mixture of frustration and hurt. That evening, as I looked at myself in the mirror, the reflection of the woman staring back was almost unrecognizable. This was not the life I had envisioned when I said, "I do." I had lost weight, my hair was a mess, and dark circles had taken permanent residence under my eyes. The polished nails and perfectly styled hair of my previous city life now seemed like distant memories. As the months passed, the relentless demands of farm life began to overwhelm me. Every morning, I was up before dawn, cooking breakfast for Jonathan and the boys, packing their lunches, and then plunging into a never-ending list of chores, feeding animals, cleaning coops and stalls, and assisting with the crops. One particularly taxing day, I woke up feeling miserable. My head throbbed painfully, and I could feel the fever brewing. But even as I considered the impossibility of taking a sick day, after all, to whom would I report my absence? A sharp knock came at my bedroom door. "Violet, are you planning to sleep all day?" It was Lainey, my mother-in-law. With a groan, I forced myself to sit up. "I'm not feeling well, Lainey. I think I might have a fever." She burst into the room, her expression stern. "Nonsense. In this family, only death is an excuse not to work. Now get up and make me some breakfast. Then there's work to be done in the yard." Stunned and too weak to argue, I dragged myself out of bed. As I mechanically prepared Lainey's breakfast, each movement was a protest from my body. "Here you go," I said, setting a plate of overcooked eggs and bacon in front of her. She took one bite, grimaced, and said, "Overcooked, but it'll have to do. Now get out there and earn your keep." I stumbled outside, my vision blurry and my body aching. The world seemed to spin as I made my way to the chicken coop. As I bent down to clean it out, a wave of nausea overwhelmed me. I barely managed to escape the coop before vomiting. Wiping my mouth, I looked up to see Jonathan watching from his tractor. "You okay?" he called out. I shook my head weakly. "I think I'm sick, Jonathan. I need to lie down." He frowned. "We can't afford for you to be sick right now, Violet. The work needs to get done. Just push through it." Tears stung my eyes as he turned back to his work. I felt so alone, so unsupported. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. That night, as I lay in bed with my fever raging, it was Colton and Liam who cared for me. They brought me water and cold compresses, their young faces lined with concern. "Are you going to be okay, Violet?" Liam asked, his voice small. I managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. Thank you for taking care of me." As the boys left the room, I heard Jonathan's voice in the hallway. "Boys, leave Violet alone. She needs to rest so she can get back to work tomorrow." At that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the family I had dreamed of. I knew I needed to make a change. Just as I resolved to do so, life threw me another curveball. A few weeks later, as I was steeling myself for another grueling day, a wave of nausea hit me again, but this time, it wasn't due to illness. With trembling hands, I took a pregnancy test. As I waited for the results, my mind raced with thoughts of a baby. How could I handle a newborn on top of everything else? When the test showed positive, I felt a tumultuous mix of joy and terror. I had hoped for some respite from the relentless farm work, but now, facing the reality of a new life growing inside me, I was unsure and scared. How would I manage this new challenge in an already demanding life? The following morning, with their departure still hanging in the cool air, I mustered every ounce of resolve. I called to the boys, my voice clear and more determined than I felt. "Colton, Liam, grab your essentials, anything you hold dear. We didn't have much time. As they scurried around, gathering their belongings, I hastily packed a small suitcase for Hazel and another for myself. My mind raced as I planned our escape from the life that had become our prison. This was not just a fleeting decision spurred by fear, but a necessary act propelled by the desire to protect my children and myself from a repeating cycle of despair and disregard. We left quietly, the farm's vast fields stretching out like a patchwork quilt made of sorrows and toils. The boys, aware yet confused, trusted my lead as we drove away from the only life they knew with their father. As the farmhouse faded into the distance, a sense of liberation mixed with an overwhelming fear of the unknown began to settle in. My thoughts were a tangled mess of hope and worry, hope for a new beginning and worry about the repercussions of our sudden departure. We headed towards the nearest town, where I planned to seek shelter and assistance. The drive was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, contemplating the gravity of our escape. Upon reaching the town, I contacted a women's shelter, explaining our situation. They welcomed us with open arms and the promise of safety. As I watched Colton and Liam play quietly in the corner of the room provided to us, a deep sense of relief washed over me. We had escaped the suffocating hold of the farm, but the road ahead was uncertain. The shelter offered legal aid to help us navigate the forthcoming challenges, and counseling to aid the boys and me in processing the trauma and upheaval of our lives. That night, as I lay beside Hazel in a bed not our own, I pondered our future. The decision to leave was fraught with uncertainty, but the alternative, the risk of fading into oblivion under the harsh demands of farm life, was far worse. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I clung to the hope that one day, we would all look back on this moment not just as an escape, but as the first step towards a truly new life, one where we could thrive, not just survive. As the boy hastily packed his things, I gathered essentials for Hazel and a few personal items for myself. Among these, I carefully retrieved Elizabeth's diary, placing it securely in my bag. Within an hour, we were in my old car, leaving the farm behind. The boys sat in silence, a somber mood settling over them as they sensed the significance of our departure. Hazel, oblivious to the changes, slept peacefully in her car seat. Using the little savings I had, I rented a small apartment in the city. It was a tight fit compared to the spaciousness of the farmhouse, but it was ours, a safe haven. The next day, I reached out to some old contacts at the archive where I used to work. They were surprised to hear from me, but were immediately supportive. With their help, I located information about Elizabeth's parents. With trembling hands, I dialed the number and was greeted by a warm, elderly voice. "Hello, Mrs. David, this is Violet. I was married to your son-in-law, Jonathan." After a brief pause and a sharp intake of breath, she replied, "Is everything all right? We've been trying to contact the boys for years. Jonathan cut us off after we lost Elizabeth. Can we see them?" It turned out the Davids lived nearby, in a neighboring town. They eagerly invited us over, anxious to reconnect with their grandchildren and to meet Hazel. As soon as we arrived at their home, a wave of warmth and acceptance washed over us. Elizabeth's parents, Scarlett and Michael, greeted us with open arms and tear-filled eyes. "Oh, look at you all," Scarlett exclaimed, embracing Colton and Liam tightly. Michael gently took Hazel from my arms, cradling her with the ease of a grandfather. Once we settled inside, I knew it was time. With shaking hands, I produced Elizabeth's diary from my bag. "There's something you need to see," I said softly, handing the diary to Scarlett. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to horror and then to grief as they read. Tears streamed down Scarlett's face, while Michael clenched his jaw in anger. "We knew something was wrong," Scarlett whispered, "but we never imagined." "Oh, Elizabeth." Just then my phone rang. It was Jonathan. I steeled myself and answered. "Where the hell are you?" he growled. "Get back home now, or I'm calling the police." I felt a surge of courage. "No, Jonathan, I'm not coming back. In fact, I'll be the one contacting the police. Don't call me again." I hung up, my heart racing. Over the next few days, with the David support, I put our plan into motion. I contacted Child Protective Services, providing detailed accounts of the abuse and neglect the children had suffered. Then, clutching Elizabeth's diary, I walked into the local police station. The detective listened gravely as I recounted everything: the forced labor, the medical neglect, Elizabeth's suicide. "This is extremely serious," he said. "We'll need to investigate thoroughly. Are you willing to press charges?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. For all of us. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Jonathan and his parents were arrested and brought in for questioning. The farm was searched, and more evidence of abuse was uncovered. The boys were interviewed by child psychologists, bravely recounting their experiences. It was heart-wrenching to hear their stories, but I was so proud of their courage. Finally, after months of legal proceedings, we found ourselves in the courtroom for the final verdict. I sat between Scarlett and Michael, holding Hazel close, with Colton and Liam by our sides. The judge's voice rang out clearly. "In light of the overwhelming evidence, this court finds the defendants guilty of child abuse, neglect, labor exploitation, and criminally negligent homicide in the death of Elizabeth David." I heard Scarlett's sharp intake of breath beside me. The judge continued, "Jonathan is sentenced to 12 years in prison. His parents, Lainey and Nathan, are each sentenced to 9 years. As the gavel came down, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, sadness, and hope. This was a new beginning for us, a chance to rebuild and heal from the shadows of the past. As I watched the boys after the trial, I could see a tangible relief in their expressions. The ordeal had lifted a heavy burden from their young shoulders, and our lives began to reshape into something new and hopeful. Elizabeth's parents, Scarlett and Michael, were nothing short of a blessing. They opened their home to us, providing a stable and loving environment as we navigated the turbulent waters of our new reality. "Your family now, Violet," Scarlett would often say, her voice warm and inviting as we sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the children play in the yard. The support from Scarlett and Michael was steadfast. They were there through the endless court dates and lawyer meetings, offering not just emotional support but practical help. Michael took Colton and Liam fishing on the weekends, allowing them to just be kids, escaping the shadows of the past for a while. Scarlett doted on baby Hazel, often singing her the same lullabies she had once sung to Elizabeth, filling our new days with sweet melodies. Encouraged by them, I hired a skilled divorce lawyer, and the Davids, ever generous, insisted on covering the legal fees. The divorce from Jonathan was straightforward, thanks to his incarceration, and it concluded with me gaining full custody of the children and a substantial portion of Jonathan's assets for their support. As grateful as I was for the Davids' hospitality, I felt it was time for us to stand on our own. With part of the settlement, I rented a comfortable apartment in the city, close to my old job at the National Archives and a reputable school for the kids. Walking back into the archives felt like a homecoming. My colleagues welcomed me with open arms, and my boss offered a flexible schedule to accommodate my new responsibilities as a single mother. Enrolling Colton and Liam back in school was a bittersweet milestone. They were excited yet nervous, having been away from formal education for some time. Hazel began attending a nearby daycare. I still remember the lump in my throat watching them head off on their first day, their backpacks looking oversized on their small backs. Scarlett and Michael continued to be a vital part of our lives, visiting often. Their presence was a constant reminder of the family we had become. They treated all 3 children with equal love, offering the grandparental affection they had been unjustly denied for too long. One Sunday, as we relaxed in the living room after a hearty family lunch, Michael cleared his throat, looking slightly nervous. "Violet, Scarlett, and I have been talking," he began. "We've updated our will. We want you and the kids to be taken care of, no matter what happens." I was speechless, but Scarlett squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You're our daughter now, Violet," she said softly, "and those are our grandchildren. We want to make it official." Tears welled up in my eyes as the full weight of their words hit me. This was what family was meant to be, a circle of unconditional love and unwavering support. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my children and these two incredible individuals who had embraced us so fully, a profound sense of peace settled over me. We were truly home, surrounded by love that knew no bounds.
"Call the police!" I shouted in a panic. For my retirement, I saved $300,000. However, it disappeared with my eldest son's move for some reason. While my second son is arranging for the police, I contacted my eldest son. Then he shouted, "Stop it." I was surprised, but I had already reported it to the police. My name is Rebecca. I went to New York to work when I was young and had 2 sons. Both of my sons are already adults, and my husband passed away early. I also retired at the age of 60. I had saved $300,000 for my retirement, so I wasn't too worried about my life. However, it was time to think about my future life. In such a situation, Bennett, who had been living with his parents all along, decided to move out. Christy, Bennett's wife, had previously complained to Bennett that she didn't want to take care of me. I thought I would be told about this someday. I have no intention of being taken care of by Bennett's wife. On the contrary, since Bennett's wife can't do housework or cooking, I have been doing their share all along. "Have you decided on a house?" I asked Bennett one day. "It hasn't been decided yet," he replied, "but we plan to decide soon." "Let me know when you decide on your move. Diego and the others are going to take me on a trip to celebrate my retirement soon," I continued. "I understand," replied Bennett. "I'm saving money now, so I'll leave when I have enough." I shared my eldest son's story with my second son, Diego, over the phone. "In that case," Diego suggested, "why don't you try installing a security camera or something? If your brother moves out, you might be more vulnerable to burglars or something." "That's right," I agreed. The news said that elderly people living alone are more vulnerable. Also, this time the trip with my second son and his wife is a little longer. I was worried about leaving the house for a long time. I immediately purchased a security camera that my second son had researched. It turned out that she would be brought tomorrow. I never thought it would come in handy later. After hearing about the move of Bennett and his wife for a while, there was a consultation about moving expenses from Bennett's wife. "Mother-in-law, can we borrow some of our moving expenses? Actually, I got fired from my part-time job. If this goes on, we won't have enough money for moving expenses," she asked me. "What did you do to get fired?" I asked. "Please lend me some money," Bennett's wife begged, ignoring my question. So I reluctantly agreed and gave them money for moving expenses and enough money to live on after moving. "You'll pay me back properly?" I inquired demandingly. "Yes," she answered. She always responded well, but deep down I resented Bennett's wife. I wondered if I should tell Bennett about it too. A few days later, I asked Bennett why he wasn't preparing for his move. "I lent Christy the moving expenses the other day, so can't you move now?" I asked him. "Huh? I don't know anything about it," Bennett replied, surprised. "Huh?" I was surprised and opened my eyes wide. "She said she would pay back after moving," I added and felt my stomach drop. "I don't know. How much did you lend?" Bennett asked. "About $3,000, I replied. "What? Mom, I can't pay that back. I'm a temp worker," my son lamented. "But Christy asked me to lend her the money," I continued, not hiding my surprise. At that moment, my eldest son's wife returned home. I hurried to the entrance and asked her, "What happened to the moving expenses?" "I'm sorry, I used it up, but you have money, so $3,000 is no big deal," she said casually. "That's impossible," I said. "What did you use it for?" "Some brand name bags and new clothes. They were on sale and I couldn't resist. It's okay. I'll pay you back as soon as I find a job, little by little," she stated. I could only be amazed at my eldest son's wife's words. "I'm already retired, so I'll be in trouble if you don't pay me back. Do you understand?" I explained. "I understand. You're so annoying," she retorted. "Is this what they call bullying a daughter-in-law?" Bennett's wife added indignantly. "Oh well, I want to leave this house as soon as possible," she muttered. Today, Diego, my second son, was supposed to come over. Diego has a 1-year-old child. His wife, Judith, is a hard worker and is currently on maternity leave. They said that they would soon go on a trip with me, so we were planning to decide on the date. My eldest son hasn't returned from his temp job yet. so only my eldest son's wife and I were at home. "Christy, can you help me today since Diego is coming over?" I asked her. "Me? Huh? I can't cook or anything. I just got my nails done the other day," she refused. "Then can you set the table or go shopping? Diego will come over for lunch," I continued. "Mom likes Diego more than Bennett, doesn't she?" Christy snickered. "That's not true. I just want them to relax since it's been a while since we've seen each other," I explained. When I said that, my eldest son's wife looked clearly dissatisfied. I don't intend to rank my children, but since it's been a long time since we last saw each other, it's inevitable that his family will be treated a little better. Although there are some difficulties with her personality, I have never made any comments comparing her with Judith. That should be the case, but my eldest son's wife hates my second son's wife and always picks on her. When Diego and his wife arrived at our house, Christy looked disapprovingly at Judith. "You're dressed so plainly today too. Can't you dress up a little? You're in front of your mother-in-law?" She tried to humiliate Judith. She never thought that way before, but it was insidious of her to say such things only now, when she wanted to make me look good. "Don't worry about it, Judith. She's just in a bad mood." I put in such a follow-up, but my second son's wife looked down apologetically. "She is always being bullied by my eldest son's wife like this." I try to protect my second son's wife as much as possible, but Christy seems to like it. When I returned to the kitchen, I warned Bennett's wife. "Christy, can't you get along better with Judith?" I demanded. "I want to get along with her, but I don't like that woman because she has a gloomy personality. Please stop favoring her more than me," she retorted. "I didn't mean it that way," I said. "Is it because you have a grandchild?" Christy continued. "Of course, I'm happy that my grandchild was born, but I won't give her preferential treatment just because of that," I responded. Added, "Do you understand?" My eldest son's wife glanced at me and snorted. She started sulking and drinking alcohol, not helping me at all. I wanted to say that she wasn't a child, but I held back and let my eldest son's wife do as she pleased. After a while, I heard the sound of my eldest son's wife and my second son's wife arguing. I hurried over there and found my eldest son's wife drunk and trying to grab my second son's wife. Diego was desperately trying to stop Christy. "What are you doing?" I exclaimed. "I don't like this woman. What is it because she has children? Are you making fun of me?" Christy screamed at Judith. Then Diego's wife apologized. "I didn't know that my sister-in-law was so concerned about it. I showed her a photo of my daughter Mirabelle and I'm sorry," she explained. "You don't have to apologize. Christy is strange," I uttered, added, "She's out of line." At that moment Bennett walked in, and his eyes widened at the chaos in the room. "What's going on here?" he asked. "Your wife," I began, but Christy cut me off, screaming, "I don't care. I'm done with all of you. We're moving out and I'm finally going to be free." She started throwing dishes, and Diego and I rushed to protect Judith and the baby. Bennett managed to grab Christy and calm her down, though the damage was done. The room was a mess, and the visit was ruined. After they left, I called Diego to apologize. "I'm so sorry for everything that happened today," I said. "It's okay, Mom," he replied, trying to reassure me. "We'll figure this out. Let's focus on the trip. It'll be good for all of us," Diego added. As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same again. Today was the day when my eldest son and his wife moved out. After seeing them off, I returned to the living room. I was planning to go on a trip with my second son's family tomorrow. I hope those two can settle down now, I thought to myself. While my second son and his wife were taking a break after being served tea and snacks, I returned to my room and began preparing for the trip. Traveling would cost a lot of money, so I opened the drawer containing my savings passbook, which I had been saving for my retirement. When I did, I was speechless. "Oh no," I whispered. Rushing down to the living room, I looked at my second son and his wife in surprise. "My savings, the deposit passbook that I had been saving for my retirement is gone," I exclaimed. My words shocked my second son and his wife, and they opened their eyes wide. "A thief? When did it happen? What should we do?" Judith asked fearfully. "How much was in it?" she inquired. 300,000, I replied. In response, Diego and his wife froze. "Call the police! It must be a thief!" I shouted at my second son, who quickly took out his cell phone. Then a thought crossed my mind. What about the eldest son's family? They had moved out without knowing that a thief had entered our house. If something was missing, they would be in trouble over there. I quickly called my eldest son. Bennett! A thief broke into our house. I didn't notice at all, but did anything get stolen from you? Make sure to check when you unpack, I warned him. Huh? What do you mean? Bennett responded, confused. My deposit passbook is missing. There was $300,000 in it. Your father had been saving it for retirement. I've already contacted the police, I explained desperately. After a brief pause, Bennett let out a loud, huh? $300,000? Is that true? Yes, your father had been saving it for retirement since he passed away, I confirmed. Bennett, still panicking, responded, Wait! No way. That's... Not letting him finish, Judith interrupted. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation. This house has security cameras installed, right? In your room? She clarified. That's right, I confirmed. It was installed in that room too. Why don't we check it? I offered. I quickly took out an old computer from my closet. I didn't know how to use a computer in detail, so I entrusted the task to my second son's wife. She operated the computer with practiced hands and suddenly froze, her face turning pale. Seeing her reaction, I grew suspicious and looked into the screen. There it was. At that moment, Bennett's voice echoed from the other end of the phone. No, don't call the police. Christy will be suspected of something weird. My mind raced as I tried to process everything. 30 minutes later, my eldest son returned in a hurry. Did you already call them? He asked, panicked. It's just a misunderstanding. I'll explain, so please don't call the police, he begged. I'm sorry, but I've already reported it. More importantly, can you explain what happened? I pressed. My eldest son looked at his wife with an embarrassed expression. His wife, however, didn't show any remorse and turned away, which made me even angrier. I heard that you received this as a gift. More importantly, if you call the police, Christy will be arrested. I'll return this, so can you forgive us? My eldest son pleaded, handing me the passbook. The moving expenses and apartment fees had already been deducted from it. This was what his wife meant by doing something about it. The security camera clearly showed my eldest son's wife taking the passbook from my closet. This is my retirement money. Why did you take it without permission? I demanded an explanation. Christy, standing next to him, snorted and claimed it was natural. I've been treated badly here. I thought I'd take this as compensation, she declared without a shred of guilt. You've never been treated badly. We've never forced you to do anything for the house, and you've had 3 meals a day. What are you dissatisfied with? I retorted. Blushing, my eldest son's wife rolled her eyes and said, I've suffered more mental anguish than my second daughter-in-law. It was hard when I was asked to come to the house and they showed my niece, Bennett's wife explained. Her delusional claim only fueled my anger. Taking someone else's property without permission is what thieves do. Do you understand that? I said angrily. I lived in this house too, so it's mine too. It's terrible to call me a thief, she cried. Please forgive me, Mom, she pleaded. Does she think she can be forgiven after doing something like this? I thought, feeling anger welling up inside me. Even my careless eldest son couldn't escape my frustration. My second son, who had been listening to our conversation, slammed his fist on the table and stood up. You've been saying whatever you want since earlier, he glared at his brother's wife. Mom has taken care of you all this time, so why are you acting like that? As far as I can see, Mom has treated you well too. Brother, tell her when something was wrong. She's your wife, Diego demanded. Bennett swallowed hard and broke out in a cold sweat. It can't be helped. I didn't know, he uttered. You didn't know. Why weren't you paying attention? It's because you're not doing your job that she's acting like this. Besides, this is Mom's house, not Christy's house. It's impossible for her to take it as she pleases, Diego scolded him. Christy looked at my second son with a disgusted expression. What a mama's boy. Is it my fault? You're so cheeky for a brother-in-law, she sneered. It's obviously your fault. You've been dissatisfied with Judith all along. Why should my wife be insulted by someone like you? Do you know how much Judith has suffered? My second son fired back. The eldest son's wife turned away and hung her head. To calm things down, Judith quickly spoke up. Let's all just take a moment. Though Diego calmed a bit, he still glared at Christy. I'm sorry. It's true that I let my wife do whatever she wanted, and even if I said something, she wouldn't listen anyway, Bennett admitted, bowing his head. His wife nudged him to take her side, but he just shook his head. How terrible. I thought you would take my side, she said, voice trembling. Stop it, Bennett finally said. It's a fact that you stole it, he added. Hearing this, the eldest son's wife knocked over a nearby vase and turned away in a bad mood. Then the police rushed in, apparently startled by the noise. They quickly subdued her and turned to us. I looked at the security camera footage, I explained to the police. They reviewed it and confirmed that the eldest son's wife had stolen the passbook before taking her into custody. Bennett, say something. Help me, Christy begged. She screamed as the police led her away. It's no use, Bennett muttered. She's too selfish. Why did this happen? I can't cover for her anymore, he continued. He looked away from his wife, hanging his head. Let's get divorced, Bennett suggested. Upon hearing those words, Christy stopped resisting, stunned. Wait, Bennett, is it okay? I asked, worried. I warned her, but she wouldn't listen. She ignored me when it was inconvenient for her, and then this happened. I can't take it anymore. I can't keep going with her like this, Bennett said, his voice heavy with regret. Understanding my son's troubles, I found it hard to blame him. After all, he was still my son. As Christy was taken away, Bennett sat down, dejected. Later we learned that Christy had also committed marriage fraud. Bennett was devastated by the revelation. Christy couldn't avoid imprisonment, and Bennett divorced her. She had to repay the money from the fraud and compensate Bennett. He offered to take on part of her debt, feeling guilty for not being able to stop her. I went on the trip with my second son and his wife, enjoying long hours with my young grandchild. Now I'm living with Bennett again. He has set a goal to quit his temporary job and work as a full-time employee because he has debt to repay. I'm happy to see my once unreliable son growing up little by little. Hello, I'm Riley, a 35-year-old mother to a wonderful 6-year-old son named Kurt, who brings so much joy into my life. Regrettably, the same cannot be said for his dad and grandmother. I have a gripping tale that continues to send shivers down my spine. I never anticipated sharing such a story, but here it goes. A few years ago, my husband and I embarked on a journey to visit his family in Toronto. I was eager to reunite with his mother, whom I hadn't seen since our wedding approximately 6 years prior. Little did I know what awaited me. It seemed my mother-in-law was either unable or unwilling to visit us. Despite my inquiries, she consistently cited pressing work-related emergencies as barriers. During the initial 6 years of my son's life, he had not encountered his paternal grandmother, a matter of concern that he would express by asking, "Mommy, when will I get to see Grandma?" Despite the challenges, I made the decision for our family to undertake the journey, even though common sense dictated that she should be the one to travel, considering the majority of our family, including extended relatives, resided in San Diego. Regardless, I was resolute in ensuring that Kurt got to know his grandmother, prompting our trip. Upon our arrival, we were greeted by Gina, whose stern and grim appearance matched her no-nonsense character. Witnessing her lack of emotion during her first meeting with her grandson was surprising. "Hi, Grandma, it's Kurt, your grandson," Kurt said eagerly. "Hello, little one. I hope your flight was pleasant," Gina replied, her tone so concise that any affectionate gesture seemed like it might elicit discomfort. Kurt, an embodiment of innocence and love, found the cool reception puzzling. Nevertheless, fueled by his positive spirit and affection, he clung to the hope of building a meaningful connection. "Hey, Mom," my husband greeted my mother-in-law. "Hi, son, how are you?" she responded. "I'm good, thanks. Let's head home. I'm freezing. I can't believe I forgot how cold Toronto can be," he continued. "You should consider moving back here. It's better than San Diego," Gina suggested. "I can't believe you can handle so much down there. It seems impossible, however. You can work remotely, right?" "Honestly, you shouldn't be working. You should retire and rest," my mother-in-law tried to convince. "Why don't you move to San Diego to be closer to us?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. "No, I'm fine here in my cold and cool weather," Gina said firmly. Cold and cool were understatements. We were practically freezing. I made sure to bundle up Kurt in as many layers as possible. He had never experienced this level of coldness before, so I was extremely worried. But for some reason, his grandma was obsessed with the cold. During our second day in Toronto, she nonchalantly proposed at the breakfast nook. "How about going for a walk?" "In this weather?" I exclaimed, added, "Weren't there warnings about an impending blizzard later today?" Kurt looked up at his dad. "Daddy, what's a blizzard?" he asked. Tyler, my husband, explained, "It's a frigid snowstorm that's both windy and quite intimidating." "Oh dear," Kurt muttered, clutching his hot chocolate. Gina dismissed our concerns. "Come on, if you keep coddling that child, he'll grow up to be overly cautious. You have to expose him to the harsh realities of life," she insisted. "He's 6 years old," I retorted. "And given it's a blizzard, Gina, I don't believe that reasoning applies here." Gina's eyes narrowed. "Seriously? You intend to show disrespect within the confines of my own home?" Her voice was strained. "No, not at all. It wasn't my intention to disrespect you," I replied quickly. "I apologize if my words came across that way. I was just trying to express that—" I tried to explain. "Fine, we can move forward then," Gina cut me off. Tyler tried to mediate. "Mom, I'm not sure it's a wise decision." Gina was insistent. "We're going to your favorite spot, Tyler. Remember, behind the rock near the waterfall." Tyler's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? The last time I visited, I was probably 6 years old." Gina pressed on. "Consider the importance of sharing one of your cherished spots in Toronto with your son, who is now the same age you were back then," my mother-in-law persuaded. Tyler hesitated but nodded. "You make a valid point. Plus, we both know a lot about Toronto weather, and we'll ensure everything is safe," he concluded. "So, Riley, please don't worry. We've got this under control," my husband reassured me. "Okay, only if you're certain," I agreed reluctantly. "I don't know anything about this, obviously. Kurt doesn't either, so let's make sure to stay close," I insisted. "Yeah, sure, no worries," Gina muttered, already heading out the door. We embarked on our journey toward the supposed favorite spot. I couldn't fathom how someone could relish this cold weather so much. Frankly, I'd rather avoid the bone-chilling cold of this place. Nevertheless, I needed to ensure that Kurt was having a good time. The sole reason we persisted in this adventure was the way his face lit up with joy and amazement at what he was witnessing. At a certain point, though, fatigue set in. It was evident that Kurt was also weary, but he refrained from complaining, wanting to maximize his bonding time with his grandma. Along the way, we passed an antiquated cabin with wisps of smoke emerging from it. "Look, a cabin," Kurt exclaimed. "Yes, sweetie, it's a cabin," I replied, trying to keep my voice upbeat despite my growing concern about the weather. Tyler suggested, "Guys, would it be all right if we pause and rest for a while? Perhaps the people in the cabin might be willing to accommodate us for a bit. After all, we are in Toronto, and Toronto is known for being super nice." Gina shot him a look. "That's not funny, and it's a bit derogatory to suggest that all of us are kind," she retorted. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Tyler stammered. "I was attempting humor and I didn't realize it was in poor taste," he added. "Yeah, well, it seems like you're unaware that many things you do are in poor taste," Gina snapped. Nevertheless, we continued along the path, growing wearier by the minute. Carrying Kurt was exhausting. His added weight didn't help my alertness as I tried to focus on the distance. I spotted Tyler and Gina moving swiftly. I called out to them, urging them to slow down. "Oh, come on, you slackers," Gina shouted back. "I'm 62 and I'm outpacing you two. Hurry up. As I mentioned earlier, we don't embark on these adventures frequently. You're going to miss the best part," she was pushing us. "What? I can't hear you. Please slow down," I pleaded, feeling increasingly anxious. At this point, Tyler and Gina seemed to have vanished. The snowfall intensified, and it appeared that the anticipated snowstorm was about to hit us. Everything around us turned white, and Kurt began to cry. I grew increasingly anxious as the cold wind howled through the seemingly deserted forest, whipping snow into my eyes and stinging my skin. Clutching my son tightly against my chest, I endeavored to shield him from the biting cold, as we trudged through knee-deep snow in search of any signs of help. Hours had elapsed since Tyler and Gina had abandoned us in the middle of nowhere, miles away from the nearest town or shelter. She had taken my husband with her, leaving me and my son to fend for ourselves in the freezing wilderness. I felt a mix of fury towards her and my husband, But more than anything, I was terrified for my son's safety. "Mommy, it's so cold. I want to go home," my son whimpered. "I know, my baby. I'm so sorry about all of this. I promise I'll find help for us, okay?" "Don't you worry one bit," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady despite my own fear. As we stumbled through the snowdrifts, I felt my body growing weaker by the minute. I knew we couldn't survive much longer in these conditions, and urgently sought a place, prioritizing safety. Just when hope seemed lost, a faint light appeared in the distance. We stumbled towards it, half blind and half frozen, until we finally reached a small cabin from before, its puffs of smoke still billowing in the harsh wind. With the little strength I had left, I knocked on the door as hard as I could and then slumped against it. A voice from within called out, "Oh, Tristan, get some boiling water and some blankets right now." A kindly old couple took us in, graciously allowing us to shed our frozen clothes, bathe in the warm water they provided, and sit by the fire. They offered us fresh clothes, hot soup, and blankets to wrap ourselves in. As we huddled together in the warmth, my anger and frustration began to boil over. I muttered, "Why would they leave us like that? I hope they freeze out there." The old woman, Alicia, looked concerned. "Are there more people out there? We have to go and get them," she uttered. I shook my head, still fuming. "No, don't bother. It's my good-for-nothing mother-in-law and husband. They left us out there to freeze." "Tristan," the old man frowned. "You must be mistaken. Why would they do such an awful thing?" he questioned. I sighed, exasperated. "I knew Gina was always like this, but Tyler, I never thought he'd do that to us," I replied. "Hold on a moment," Alicia interrupted. "Gina, you say? That name rings a bell. If she's a woman with a slender build, always reserved and serious, does she wear purple glasses and have a mole on her upper lip?" she asked with deep interest. "Exactly," I replied, surprised. "How do you know her?" I added. "She typically roams through these parts," Tristan explained. "But it's quite unusual during this season of frequent snowstorms. I've never spotted her around here at this time of the year." "How peculiar. Now, my dear," he turned to me. "Please share how you're acquainted with her," he requested. "I'm her daughter-in-law," I said. "We came to visit from San Diego because she hadn't seen her grandchild Kurt since he was born. I hoped they would bond and get to know each other, but she appeared disinterested even after our long journey," I continued. Kurt was cradled in my arms, peacefully asleep with a smile on his face. Thank goodness he made it. Thank goodness he's safe. The mystery of how his little body endured all of that still lingers with me to this day. However, as I looked at him, frustration welled up against his ineffectual father and grandmother. Tristan's face softened. "How could she not come down to visit that beautiful baby?" he asked and added, "He's a joy to behold, bringing tears to our eyes when we think about what happened. You see, we don't have any children of our own. We couldn't conceive. Hence, we decided to settle here and live amidst the mountaintops, an existence we've always desired. Yet we can't escape the emptiness in our hearts. To learn that someone privileged enough to have such a lovely grandchild has chosen complacency is unforgivable," Tristan concluded. "You know," Alicia added, "I've always had an uneasy feeling about Gina. I've shared this with you, Tristan. That woman doesn't seem right in the head," she reasoned. I nodded, feeling the sting of betrayal. I called out to them, urging them to wait for us, but they continued ahead. They could hear me, yet they chose not to listen, I explained. Added, "Why would they do that?" Alicia responded gently. "Sometimes we don't understand why people commit such thoughtless actions. All we can do is strive to do our best," she remarked. The rest of the evening was spent in conversation, and despite my lingering frustration, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over me. I knew that Kurt and I were safe. Morning came, and it seemed the blizzard had subsided. Checking various websites, I found weather reports stating it was now safe to navigate through the town and city. I exchanged contact information with Alicia and Tristan, expressing gratitude for their love and care. "There's no need to thank us," Tristan said warmly. "We just did the right thing. Anyone with a shred of compassion would have done the same. Please let me escort you back to your home," he suggested. They accompanied us to our residence, only to find Tyler and Gina sitting comfortably on the front porch, seemingly unconcerned about the harrowing experience Kurt and I had faced the day before. I got out of the car and couldn't contain my anger. "What the hell is wrong with you people? How could you leave us there?" I shouted. Tyler looked up nonchalant. It was slowing us down. We wanted to see the frozen waterfall, he replied. Are you serious? I yelled. Kurt could have died last night. Don't you care about that, Tyler? I wouldn't calm down. Gina chimed in, her tone cold. To be fair, you could have just stayed home if you weren't ready for this adventure. At that moment, my vision turned red, and I was ready to unleash my anger, shouting and kicking to let the whole world know how heartless and sick they were. Not only did they abandon us, but they also seemed to have no remorse for their actions. It felt as if they were intentionally putting us in harm's way. Before I could unleash a torrent of irreversible actions and words, Tristan held me back, urging me to compose myself. Kurt remained in the car with Alicia, witnessing the confrontation. It took a moment for me to regain my composure, but even though I had calmed down, my demeanor remained aggressive and argumentative. You abandoned us, and we could have died, Tyler. Don't you care about that? Don't you care that your mother put our lives in jeopardy? I asked angrily. Tyler scoffed. Don't be so dramatic, Riley. She wasn't trying to do that. The reason we didn't come back for you is that we believed you could find help and shelter. You pointed out that cabin, and it seems you got the help you needed, although not thanks to me or my mother. Tristan stepped forward, his voice firm. I can't believe what I'm hearing right now. How can you be so cold and callous to your wife? I'm tempted to come over there and knock some sense into you. Tyler sneered. Try it, old man. I dare you. Enough, everyone, Gina said sharply. Don't give me a headache. Listen, Riley, I'm sorry you couldn't handle the cold weather, but I swear there was no ill intention on my part. My mother-in-law tried to justify herself. Oh, really? Tristan challenged. Why would you go trekking at this time of the year? We never see you during this season, so why now? Why now when you have a child who just wanted to bond with you? In other words, one might claim that this degree of gross negligence was deliberate. Gina, there's no way an experienced tracker like you would travel during this time. Only experts can deal with the weather like this, not novices like Riley and a child like Kurt. You're a sick and twisted, pathetic individual, he added furiously. This seemed to break through Gina's cold exterior momentarily, as she looked pained, but she quickly returned to her wicked witch of the West demeanor. I don't know what you're trying to insinuate, but if you're looking for a battle, I can assure you that you'll lose. Don't forget that I'm a wealthy woman with access to the best legal representation. Let's see how your little argument plays out in court, old man, she stated. You two are sick, I spat, and I never want to see you again. I hope you rot in hell, I added. You know what, Riley? Gina snapped. I don't care anymore. I don't care about keeping up appearances for you or anyone else. So let me be clear for everyone to hear. I don't care about you and that baby. Honestly, I wish both of you had died yesterday. At least this way, you'd stop bothering me about meeting that baby. Do I look like I care? She said. I found myself moving toward her as if my body had a mind of its own. Walking up to her, I slapped her, continuing to deliver slaps and kicks until Tyler and Tristan intervened. Riley, how dare you? Tyler shouted, grabbing my arm. How dare I? I yelled back, still seething with anger, and continued. How dare you sit there and defend this witch? My mother-in-law shrieked from the ground. I'll sue you! How dare you put your hands on me? My anger kept spilling out. You had it coming! I spat back. Riley, please, my husband said, trying to calm things down. She didn't mean that. Look, tensions are high right now. Why don't we all take a deep breath? Let's come inside and sort this out, he suggested. I looked at Tyler, my eyes filled with disgust. You are a weak and pathetic man, and I hope you spend the rest of your life atoning for what you did to your son, I exclaimed. Before Tyler could respond, I spat squarely in his face and headed inside. After picking up Kurt's things from the house, I got into the car with Alicia and Kurt. Mommy, I'm scared, Kurt whimpered from the back seat. What's happening? Why did you fight Grandma? He asked. Sweetie, I'm so sorry you had to see that, I replied, my voice softening. Things are complicated here, and I don't want to lie to you, but I'm afraid you're a bit too young to understand. For now, I'm sorry to tell you that it seems like Grandma and Daddy don't want us here. We can't be here because Daddy and Grandma aren't very nice people, and I don't want you to be around people who aren't nice, I tried to explain to my son. But Alicia and Tristan are nice people, aren't they? He asked, his little voice filled with innocence. Yes, I love Alicia and Tristan, I said, glancing over at them. Kurt's eyes brightened a little. Can Alicia and Tristan be my grandma and grandpa? He questioned hopefully. Alicia turned around in her seat and smiled warmly at Kurt. Oh, bless your heart, my sweet child. Of course I can be your grandma. I'll always be your friend and promise to take care of you if you need me to, she replied. Tristan got in the car and drove us to a hotel where we could rest and recuperate. Unfortunately, the whole ordeal was overwhelming. I feared for the future of both Kurt and me, as it hinted at a potential divorce due to the power and influence of Tyler and Gina. I decided to talk to Alicia and Tristan about it, once Kurt was fast asleep. What am I going to do? I said, my voice trembling. I might end up in jail. Nonsense. That hag won't press charges, Tristan reassured me. But what if she does? I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Alicia leaned in closer. She won't press charges because we have evidence of her conspiracy to commit murder. I stared at her, stunned. How did you manage this? Alicia gave a small, knowing smile. We always anticipate, dear. We discreetly documented the entire situation. Now, you can take this recording with you and use it as evidence against your husband and mother-in-law in court, she offered. How did you even pull this off? You're like angels in disguise, I marveled. Hush, my dear, Tristan said gently. Don't concern yourself with the details. Just listen to the audio recording. As we listened, it became evident that the entire incident had been recorded, including the moment when I physically confronted her. Now, there's a possibility of facing charges for physical assault, I muttered, feeling the weight of the situation. Oh God, why did I do that? Listen, my dear, Alicia said softly, taking my hand. You acted as any loving mother would. You're a protective mama bear, and you were defending your child. Frankly, I wish Tristan and Tyler hadn't intervened. You would have given her a proper lesson, but the key is, if you had physically confronted her, the wounds would heal. You need to hit where it hurts, their finances. Sue her for everything. Divorce that man and leave with the money, she admonished me. But the recording, you can hear me hitting her, I said, anxiety creeping back in. What are you talking about? Tristan interrupted. At that moment, Tristan isolated the audio clip of my attack and removed it. I don't hear anything about you fighting someone, and I certainly don't hear any threats of legal action, he uttered with a smile. I was overwhelmed with gratitude for these people. They were truly my guardian angels. The next day we headed home. I ignored calls and messages from Tyler and Gina, who seemed to be attempting damage control. It puzzled me why it took them this long to realize their wrongdoing. However, I paid no heed. It was too late to apologize. Upon returning home, I meticulously built my case against my mother-in-law and Tyler. Utilizing the funds at my disposal, I enlisted the services of the finest lawyer available. We presented the case and, thankfully, after some time, I emerged victorious in the lawsuit. My mother-in-law settled, awarding me a staggering $2 million. I was genuinely astonished at the substantial amount I managed to extract from her, although she persistently sent me death threats throughout our legal battle. In the case of Tyler, we naturally divorced. Due to his significant role in the matter and his gross negligence, he was compelled to provide additional financial compensation on top of the predetermined alimony and child support. With this financial influx, I was able to reset my life. I established a flourishing daycare near my residence, aptly named Alicia's Playhouse. Furthermore, I invited Alicia and Tristan to San Diego to commemorate our victories once all settlements were finalized. Here's to a fresh start for Riley and Kurt. May they thrive, they congratulated me. Cheers to Grandma and Grandpa. I love you both, I replied sincerely. Not only did I rid myself of the toxic influences that were my ex-mother-in-law and ex-husband, but I also gained substantial financial resources and love from the right sources. Alicia and Tristan are even contemplating a move to San Diego after spending their entire lives in Toronto. Perhaps a change in scenery is what they need. Regardless, I'm immensely grateful for this new chapter in my life.